My roommate let his girlfriend throw out my weighted blanket and noise machine without asking, then mocked me for being upset, saying I'd thank her someday. But 8 weeks later, she was crying in the lobby after a mysterious recording of her was slipped into every mailbox. My housemate, Hugh, and I shared a bond that sitcoms often portray. For 3 years, our living arrangement was incredibly smooth, with our most significant disagreement being the age-old debate about pineapple on pizza. Then, Lexi burst into our lives, much like a glitter bomb at a solemn event, loud, out of place, and incredibly difficult to remove. From the very beginning, she seemed to view me as an incomplete puzzle. As someone on the autism spectrum, I rely on specific routines to maintain my well-being. My weighted blanket isn't merely for comfort. It serves as a shield against a world that often feels overwhelmingly loud. My noise machine doesn't just aid sleep. It prevents my mind from short-circuiting, much like a phone submerged in water. However, trying to explain this to Lexi was akin to teaching a serpent to play the piano. I attempted to win her over. I baked her brownies that were truly exceptional. I willingly gave up the prime parking spot. I even endured her essential oils multi-level marketing presentation, feigning the excitement of a child anticipating ice cream, nodding as she claimed lavender could remedy everything from anxiety to economic downturns. Meanwhile, Hugh was so enveloped in his infatuation that he seemed to lose all sense of reality. When Lexi completely reconfigured our living room, citing some astrological influence like Mercury and microwaves, she dismantled my carefully constructed sensory-safe space, which had taken me months to perfect. Hugh merely chirped that she was simply trying to be helpful. When she threw an unexpected party in our apartment, with unexpected being the key word, Hugh commended her for being inclusive. If Lexi had decided to decorate with live bees, Hugh would have praised her dedication to ecological living. The true chaos began 2 weeks ago. Lexi cornered me, much like an insistent salesperson. Sensing my vulnerability, she demanded I discard my weighted blanket, noise machine, and stress toys, deeming them embarrassing when her friends visited. I clarified that these were not toys, but rather essential medical aids for my neurological functioning. Without them, I operate about as effectively as a chocolate teapot. Her reply struck me with the force of sheer ignorance. She asserted that at 24 years old, I was past the age of 6 and needed to stop using autism as an excuse for being weird. She then added that her cousin had autism and didn't require any of those items, implying that all autistic individuals are identical, as if mass-produced with default settings. Hugh burst in, quicker than gossip spreading at a high school reunion, and without even inquiring about the situation, immediately sided with his girlfriend. He actually stated I was making Lexi uncomfortable in what she considered her second home. She had been dating him for only 4 months, and suddenly our apartment was her second home. I had resided there for 3 years, but apparently, my own dwelling had become hostile territory. 3 days ago, I returned from work feeling as though my nervous system had been put through a blender. It was one of those days where every sound felt like a personal assault, and fluorescent lights seemed specifically designed to cause pain. All I desired was my weighted blanket and 20 minutes of quiet to reassemble my scrambled thoughts, only to discover everything was gone. My weighted blanket, the noise machine recommended by my doctor, my entire collection of stress management tools, all had vanished like my faith in humanity. The carefully chosen items that kept me stable, that allowed me to function in a world that always felt set to the wrong frequency, had disappeared. When I confronted Hugh, he admitted Lexi had discarded everything in the dumpster. Her rationale was so spectacularly foolish it deserved its own reality show. She believed she was administering tough love, thinking that without my crutches, I would magically learn to be normal, as if autism were merely a habit I could break, similar to nail-biting or trusting Hugh's judgment. I stood there, smiling like a malfunctioning automaton, as Hugh explained how Lexi was helping me mature, how this was for my own benefit, how I would eventually be grateful. But internally, my mind was working with the precision of a Swiss watch. You see, while Lexi thought she was imparting a lesson about growing up, she had actually just enrolled herself in a master class on consequences. Lexi's most prized possession wasn't Hugh or her array of healing crystals. It was her immaculate white Mercedes, which she cared for more diligently than some people care for their children. She would occupy 2 parking spaces to prevent any door dings. Both Hugh and I have had to walk over half a mile to reach home because of this. She would meticulously detail it weekly, with the precision of a neurosurgeon. That car was her pride, her identity, her everything. And as it happened, I worked at a shipping company with access to vast quantities of packing peanuts. Tomorrow morning, when Her Majesty opens her car door, expecting a spotless interior, She is about to experience what sensory overload truly feels like. The static-charged packing peanuts clung to my hands like a sense of culpability as I stood in the parking lot at 3 a.m. My fingers trembled against the industrial-sized bag, not from the cold, but from the sensory chaos overwhelming my nervous system. The revenge plan that had seemed so flawless in my mind now felt like attempting to solve a Rubik's Cube while riding a roller coaster. I dropped the bag. The peanuts scattered across the asphalt, mirroring my fragmented thoughts. My legs gave way, and I sat right there on the cold ground, swaying slightly as the weight of everything pressed down. The fluorescent parking lot lights hummed with that specific frequency that made my teeth ache. Without my weighted blanket, without my noise machine, the world felt as if its volume knob had been cranked to 11, and I had no control. I stumbled back to the apartment, leaving the peanuts behind like discarded aspirations. My phone vibrated. Lexi had messaged Hugh about hearing unsettling noises outside. Of course, she had. Morning arrived like an unearned hangover. I shuffled to the bathroom for my routine, the one thing that helped me begin each day without feeling overwhelmed. But everything was amiss. My toothbrush rested on the wrong side of the sink. My shower supplies had been rearranged into some aesthetically pleasing but functionally illogical pattern. The body wash was where the shampoo should be. The shampoo was simply missing. My hands began to flap uncontrollably. The meltdown hit like a tidal wave. I collapsed onto the bathroom floor, pressing my palms against my eyes as everything became too much, too bright, too loud, too different, too wrong. Hugh knocked on the door, asking if I was being overly dramatic again. His voice carried that new tone he had adopted since Lexi's arrival, as if speaking to a toddler having a tantrum. I wanted to explain that this wasn't drama. This was my brain malfunctioning because someone had dismantled my coping mechanisms, and now even my morning routine was sabotaged. But words wouldn't form. They never did during meltdowns. My work alarm had been sounding for 20 minutes. I hadn't even noticed it over the mental static. I arrived at work 45 minutes late, my shirt inside out because I had dressed in a panic. My manager pulled me aside before I could even clock in. Third time this month, she reminded me. Ever since my equipment was removed, I had struggled to maintain my usual punctuality. She mentioned concerns about my reliability. Then she delivered the bombshell. HR wanted to meet regarding my accommodation needs. The word accommodation made my stomach sink. I had worked so diligently to avoid needing official accommodations, to prove I could function without special treatment. Now, Lexi's tough love experiment was dismantling 3 years of carefully maintained professional reputation. During lunch, I sat alone in the break room, attempting to eat while my hands trembled. The tremors had begun that morning and refused to cease. Sarah from accounting noticed. She had always been observant in a subtle, non-intrusive way. She slid her noise-canceling headphones across the table. She told me they were just for today, but her eyes conveyed that she understood this was more significant than a single day. The headphones rested between us like a life preserver. Accepting them meant acknowledging how dire things had become. My phone screen illuminated with 7 missed calls from my mother. Lexi must have contacted her as well. I took the headphones. The moment I put them on, the world muted to a manageable volume. The relief was so profound that I began to cry right there in the break room. Sarah said nothing, simply moved to stand guard by the door, casually checking her phone while blocking anyone from entering. She granted me 10 minutes of protected silence, the first genuine peace I had experienced in days. When I returned home that evening, I found my bedroom door ajar. Lexi stood by my mini fridge, garbage bag in hand, discarding my safe foods. The mac and cheese that was the only thing I could consume during sensory overload. The specific brand of crackers that didn't have the wrong texture. The juice boxes I kept for blood sugar drops during meltdowns. All of it went into her bag while she mumbled about expiration dates. They were not expired. I knew because I checked dates obsessively, another autistic trait Lexi probably thought needed fixing. Something inside me fractured. Not in the violent way people often assume when autistic individuals become overwhelmed, but in the way a rubber band breaks after being stretched too far. I shouted at her to leave. My voice emerged raw and desperate, nothing like the calculated anger I had planned. Lexi's face transformed into a satisfied smirk. She already had her phone out, recording. She made sure to capture my hand flapping and my rocking on my heels, framing every stim as an aggressive gesture. She retreated slowly from my room, still filming, narrating about feeling threatened. Within an hour, she had posted the video in the building's Facebook group. The caption read like a plea from a concerned citizen. I'm worried about violent behavior from my roommate. Should I call someone? I just want everyone to be safe. 3 neighbors commented supportively within minutes. They lacked the context. They didn't witness the weeks of systematic destruction that led to that moment. They only saw an autistic person yelling and stimmying, and Lexi's careful framing did the rest. Then a private message appeared. Mrs. Chun from 4B simply wrote, "I don't believe her." That small message prevented me from completely spiraling as I watched my reputation in the building crumble in real time. I went to take out the trash, needing to move, needing to do something. In the bin, I discovered a receipt that sent a chill down my spine. From the grocery store, timestamped during my work hours today. Lexi had purchased precisely my safe foods, the same brands, the same quantities, just to discard them. She had planned this, bought my food specifically to destroy it, to provoke a meltdown, to film it. Hugh confronted me an hour later, using words that sounded rehearsed. He expressed concern about me scaring Lexi, suggesting I might need professional help beyond my current therapist. The way he spoke made it clear this wasn't his original thought, but he had adopted it as his own. Then my phone rang. My mother's contact photo filled the screen. I knew before answering that Lexi had contacted her as well. Mom's voice carried that cautious tone she used when she believed I was having an episode. She inquired if I was taking my medication properly, if perhaps I needed to adjust my dose. I didn't have medication. I had told her this countless times. Autism isn't something you medicate away. But Lexi's concern had overridden years of education. The following day at work, everything felt more challenging. During a team meeting, I found myself rocking in my chair. My usual subtle movement, which helped me focus, had become more pronounced without my other coping tools. My colleagues exchanged quick glances, but I caught them. An email preview popped up on my phone. Performance improvement plan discussion. When I arrived home, Lexi was cooking fish. The odor hit me like a physical barrier. She knew I couldn't tolerate strong food smells, especially during my usual quiet time. She called out cheerfully that she was helping expand my palate, that I would thank her later. Thursday's therapy appointment became my sole anchor in a world that felt like it was tilting off its axis. Dr. Martinez noted a significant regression in my coping abilities. She recommended stress leave, but we both knew I couldn't afford it. Not financially, not professionally, especially with HR already scrutinizing my accommodations. I attempted to file a complaint with building management about my belongings being discarded. Brad, the building manager, dismissed it with a shrug. He stated it was hard living with special needs people, and that Lexi was probably trying to help. His niece sold Lexi's essential oils. I remembered the multi-level marketing network ran deep. I tried to document everything on my phone, but executive function had become nearly impossible without my sensory regulation tools. My notes were fragmented, desperate sentences that started strong but trailed off as my focus shattered. Screenshots were saved but unorganized, evidence that would appear chaotic to anyone else. Then I discovered the letter. Lexi had enrolled me in an autism social skills class at the community center using my insurance information. The insurance company had approved it based on her statement as my caregiver. She had forged documents claiming to be my caregiver. 2 neighbors began avoiding me in the hallways. I overheard one whisper to her husband that Lexi said I was getting worse. She clutched her purse tighter when passing me, as if autism were contagious or violent. The realization struck me during another sleepless night. The stress was causing me to display more visible autistic traits. Every stim, every moment of overwhelm, every meltdown played perfectly into Lexi's narrative. She was creating the very behavior she claimed to be concerned about. Sarah found me in the supply closet the next day, not crying this time, just sitting among the boxes of paper, trying to find quiet. She mentioned her brother had experienced something similar, an ex who wanted to fix him. She offered to arrange a call after work. That evening, I spoke to Tom via video chat. He looked weary, in the way that comes from enduring something rather than simply experiencing it. He told me his ex had done similar things, but had given up after 6 months. When I asked why she gave up, he paused. Then he said we would discuss that later. The next morning, a package arrived. My Amazon order of replacement sensory items. Lexi intercepted it at the door, refusing to give it to me. She claimed it was enabling unhealthy coping. She held my medical equipment hostage in the name of helping me grow. But that afternoon, a small miracle occurred. Mrs. Chin caught me in the hallway and quietly pressed something soft into my hands, a homemade weighted lap pad. Her grandson had used it, she explained. Then she whispered not to tell anyone and disappeared into her apartment before I could thank her. I sat in the stairwell with that lap pad across my legs and felt human for the first time in weeks. The weight grounded me just enough to think clearly, to realize this was far from over, to understand that Lexi wasn't finished with her campaign of help. But for just that moment, with Mrs. Chin's secret gift providing a tiny island of sensory peace, I could breathe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new videos, new concerned citizens, new attempts to fix me. But right now, I had this, a lap pad made with kindness by someone who understood that sometimes the smallest accommodations make the biggest difference. It wasn't enough, but it was something. And sometimes, something is all you need to endure another day. The weighted lap pad became my lifeline through the weekend, but Monday morning brought fresh torment. Lexi had emailed my HR department over the weekend. The subject line glowed on my work computer. Concerns from a roommate regarding employee mental state. She had attached edited versions of her videos, carefully cropped to remove context. The email copied me, she claimed, for transparency. My hands trembled as I read her message. She had positioned herself as a concerned citizen, worried about workplace safety. The videos showed me stimmying, rocking, flapping my hands, all framed as aggressive or unstable behavior. HR scheduled a mandatory fitness for duty evaluation for the following week. I stared at the screen, understanding dawning like ice water in my veins. This could end my career. 3 years of impeccable performance reviews destroyed by someone who had known me for 4 months. Sarah appeared at my desk with a cup of tea and a knowing look. She had seen the email too. Lexi had somehow found her work address and copied her as well. We didn't need words. Sarah simply squeezed my shoulder and returned to her desk, but I noticed her typing furiously. Within an hour, 2 other coworkers had quietly stopped by my desk with small gestures of support, a stress ball left by my keyboard, a bag of my favorite sensory-friendly snacks. They were creating a buffer. That evening, Tom called earlier than planned. His face on the video screen looked grim. He had been thinking about my situation all weekend, he said, and needed to tell me something. His ex had only ceased her campaign after he had a stress-induced seizure. She had become fearful of legal liability, but not before she had systematically destroyed his career, his friendships, and his mental health. The medical bills from the seizure had bankrupted him. He had lost his apartment. It took 2 years to rebuild. The connection clicked. Tom's exhaustion wasn't just from surviving. It was from knowing the true cost of this type of targeted harassment. He warned me to document everything, even if my executive function made it messy. Even disorganized evidence was better than none. Tuesday morning, I submitted my documentation to my therapist. Dr. Martinez wrote a detailed letter supporting my workplace accommodations, but she had to note the significant environmental stressors at home. She gently suggested that I might need to consider alternative living arrangements. The words felt like defeat. I tried creating a comprehensive log on my phone, but the stress made organization nearly impossible. My entries became fragmented, half-finished sentences, screenshots saved in the wrong folders, timestamps that didn't make sense because I had forgotten to note the dates. It looked exactly like what it was, the desperate documentation of someone whose executive function was failing under extreme stress. Property management responded to my formal complaint with bureaucratic indifference. They couldn't intervene in roommate disagreements. The property manager noted, however, that I had seemed agitated during our meeting, another mark against me, another piece of Lexi's narrative confirmed. But something shifted at work. Sarah and 2 others had quietly organized. When Lexi showed up at the office Thursday, claiming to check on me, they formed a subtle barrier. Sarah engaged her in conversation about essential oils. Another co-worker asked detailed questions about her Mercedes. Security began recognizing her, noting her visits in their log. She couldn't get near my workspace. Friday afternoon, I overheard Lexi on a phone call. She was discussing conservatorship options with someone, mentioning adults who couldn't care for themselves. The words legal guardianship drifted through her bedroom door. My blood ran cold. She was escalating beyond harassment into legal control. Tom's warnings suddenly felt prophetic. He had sent me links to forums where individuals like Lexi gathered, autism warrior parents and partners who believed tough love could cure neurodivergence. The rhetoric was terrifying in its certainty. They shared strategies for gaining legal control over resistant adults. Lexi's playbook was written by others who had done this before. The weekend brought temporary relief. I spent Saturday creating the most detailed documentation I could manage. Despite my scattered focus, Tom had suggested using voice recordings when writing became too difficult. My phone filled with rambling audio notes, timestamps of Lexi's behavior, descriptions of what she had done. Mrs. Chin came through with a secret weighted lap pad, like she was running an underground sensory support network. This kind grandmother was essentially the resistance leader we all needed right now. It wasn't organized, but it existed. Sunday, I forced myself to appear normal during the fitness for duty evaluation preparation. I researched common questions, practiced maintaining eye contact, rehearsed explanations for my accommodations that sounded professional rather than desperate. The mask I had spent years learning to wear had never felt heavier. The evaluation itself took place Wednesday morning. I sat across from an occupational therapist who seemed kind but clinical. I forced myself to appear calm, professional, stable. Every instinct screamed to stim, to rock, to self-soothe, but I kept my hands folded carefully in my lap. I explained my accommodations in measured tones. I presented Dr. Martinez's letter. I maintained the neurotypical performance that was slowly draining me. She noted I seemed tired but functional. The evaluation cleared me with a recommendation for ongoing monitoring. My job was safe, but now every mistake would be scrutinized through the lens of mental fitness. Every bad day would be pathologized. Every normal human error would be evidence. The lease renewal arrived that afternoon. Lexi had convinced Hugh to add her as an official tenant. All 3 signatures were required. The document sat on the kitchen counter like a ticking bomb. 72 hours to decide whether to sign away more authority to someone actively undermining me or lose my home. I scheduled apartment viewings as a backup, but the rental market was brutal. Everything in my price range was either too far from work or a sensory nightmare. Thin walls, fluorescent lighting, no accommodations for my needs. Leaving meant starting over. Staying meant continued torment. Mrs. Chin's daughter, Catherine, visited that weekend. I had seen her before, a quiet woman who nodded politely in hallways. This time, she lingered after leaving her mother's apartment. She casually mentioned that she was a lawyer. She had noticed some interesting behavior during her visits. She had started documenting interactions, she said, just in case. The words were carefully neutral, but her eyes conveyed understanding. Lexi called an apartment meeting Sunday evening. She had prepared a presentation, actual slides on her laptop detailing my concerning behaviors. Every normal stim was reframed as disturbing. Hand flapping became aggressive gesturing. Rocking became unstable behavior. My use of headphones became antisocial withdrawal. Hugh nodded along, not because he agreed, but because agreeing meant the conflict would end sooner. She concluded with a suggestion that I might be happier in a group home with people who understood my needs. She had researched several facilities, she said, and would be happy to help with the transition. Her tone was poisonously sweet, all concern and care. While she attempted to institutionalize me, Hugh pulled me aside later, exhausted. He just wanted everyone to get along. Couldn't I try harder to compromise? He didn't comprehend how his peacekeeping enabled her behavior. He didn't understand that compromise meant accepting abuse. Sarah's brother sent more links that night. The pattern was clear. Lexi's rhetoric matched word for word with posts from those forums. She genuinely believed she was helping. In her mind, she was saving me from myself. The fact that she was destroying me in the process was just proof that I needed more help. Only Hugh and Brad, the building manager, fully embraced Lexi's narrative, but that was enough. Hugh controlled half the apartment. Brad controlled whether I could file complaints. 2 people believing her falsehoods were sufficient to make my life unbearable. The work evaluation results returned, cleared, but monitored. Every future mistake would be viewed through the lens of mental fitness. The relief of retaining my job was tempered by the knowledge that I was now permanently marked as potentially unstable. Sarah offered her spare room that evening. A clean break, she said. A chance to heal. But I knew leaving meant Lexi won. It meant abandoning my home, admitting defeat. More importantly, it meant she would do this to someone else. I chose to stay, even knowing the cost. The next few days blurred together. Lexi escalated her provocations. She played loud music during my documented quiet hours, calling it exposure therapy. She cooked foods with strong smells during my usual decompression time. She rearranged common spaces daily, destroying any sense of predictability. Each action was framed as helpful. Each torment was therapy in her twisted logic. My work performance improved slightly thanks to my coworkers' support. Sarah had quietly stocked the break room with sensory items. Nothing obvious, just stress balls and fidget toys anyone might use. But at home, I was deteriorating. The fitness tracker I wore for health insurance showed an average of 3 hours of sleep per night. Stress-induced insomnia was destroying what little function I had left. A small support network formed organically. Sarah checked in daily. Mrs. Chin left small gifts of food or comfort items by my door. Dr. Martinez extended session times without charging extra. The legal aid volunteer Catherine had connected me with called weekly. Each person held a piece of my stability. Lexi's provocations grew more desperate as I survived each attack. Her certainty was shaking. She had expected me to have already broken, to have admitted I needed her help. My continued existence, battered but unbroken, challenged her worldview. Hugh caught her crying one evening while reading her forums. Real tears, not manipulation. She genuinely believed I was choosing to be autistic. In her world, I was a stubborn child refusing to grow up. The forums reinforced this belief with pseudoscientific articles and anecdotes about recovered autistic people who had learned to be normal. The contrast between us became stark. My documentation, messy but consistent, showed a pattern of escalating harassment. Lexi's interventions grew increasingly frantic as each failed to produce the breakthrough she expected. She was losing control of the narrative. Dr. Martinez called with urgent news. Someone claiming to be my caregiver had requested my therapy records. The request used language that suggested legal authority. Lexi was trying to access my private medical information. Dr. Martinez had refused, but the attempt was troubling. The lease renewal deadline approached like a storm. 72 hours became 48, then 24. I had to decide whether to sign away more power or lose my home. The apartment viewing I had scheduled was a disaster. The landlord took one look at my stimmying and suddenly remembered other applications. 5 neighbors filed formal complaints about Lexi's music therapy sessions. The noise violated building quiet hours. Brad had to issue a warning, though he made it clear he still thought she was trying to help. The tide was slowly turning. The stakes became clear. My mental health versus my home, my stability versus my principles, my survival versus justice. There was no winning move, only choosing which loss I could live with. I signed the lease renewal with trembling hands. Lexi filmed the entire meeting for documentation. Under the table, Mrs. Chin's lap pad pressed against my legs, the only thing keeping me grounded. My signature looked like a child's scrawl, another sign of instability for Lexi's collection. Hugh's family group chat erupted that evening. Lexi had sent an unsolicited article about enabling autism to his entire family. His sister, a speech therapist, removed Lexi from the chat with a scathing response about neurodiversity. Hugh's parents asked pointed questions about his girlfriend's behavior. The first crack in his armor appeared. The building community shifted subtly. Neighbors started coordinating to ensure I never came home to an empty apartment. Someone always happened to be in the lobby when I arrived. Small talk, nothing obvious. But I was never alone with Lexi in common spaces. Catherine helped file a formal housing discrimination complaint. Not a lawsuit. I couldn't afford that. Just documentation with the housing authority. It would take years to resolve, but it created an official record. Paper trails mattered, even messy ones. Lexi played her final card. She told Hugh I had made a pass at her. The accusation was so obviously false that even Hugh couldn't pretend to believe it, but he was too exhausted to fight. He confronted me weakly, going through the motions. Our friendship, already strained, snapped completely. We became roommates in the coldest sense of the word. News trickled in through Tom. Lexi's multi-level marketing scheme had placed her on probation. She had been aggressively recruiting at autism support groups, targeting vulnerable individuals. Complaints had accumulated. Her income stream was threatened. The pressure was building on her as well. The building implemented new policies that coincidentally supported my needs. Weighted blankets appeared in common areas for everyone's comfort. Sensory-friendly hours were posted in the lobby. Nothing official, nothing that named me, but the community was quietly adapting. A local disability rights group featured my story anonymously in their newsletter. The details were altered, but the pattern was clear. Lexi's previous victim recognized it and contacted the organization. The pattern was documented. She had done this before. I confronted Hugh with simple truth. No drama, no accusations, just facts. She was harming me, and he was allowing it. He couldn't make eye contact. He admitted he knew, but was too tired to deal with it. Our friendship officially ended with a whimper, not a bang. 3 years of brotherhood, destroyed by 4 months of toxic affection. Tom shared more difficult truths. His ex's previous victim had taken 11 months before attempting self-harm. Only then had the family intervened. The information hit me like ice water. I understood now why he had been so insistent about documentation. His hands moved nervously as he explained the pattern. First the isolation, then the escalation, then the breaking point. Mrs. Chin's daughter, Catherine, being a lawyer and just casually dropping that bombshell while documenting everything, was pure brilliance. Property management issued new quiet hours that aligned with my needs. They couldn't take sides, they said, but noise violations were noise violations. Lexi's music therapy was now officially against building rules. Small victories felt hollow against the daily damage. I resubmitted my disability accommodation request with updated medical documentation. The file was thick now, documenting not just my autism, but the deterioration caused by months of harassment. Dr. Martinez's notes painted a clear picture of regression under targeted abuse. The building's small acts of kindness accumulated. Elevators were held without being asked. Packages were accepted without question. Brief smiles in hallways. Not dramatic gestures, just human decency in the face of cruelty. It wasn't enough to fix things, but but it made survival possible. Lexi launched her most desperate attack. She called Adult Protective Services, claiming I was a danger to myself. She used my therapy admission about self-harm thoughts as evidence. The complaint triggered an investigation. Official letters arrived. Caseworkers would visit. My competence would be evaluated by strangers. Some neighbors distanced themselves again. APS involvement frightened them, even if they didn't believe Lexi. The whispers returned. The avoided eye contact. The clutched purses. I was truly isolated in the ways that mattered most. The APS interview loomed. Hugh buried himself in work, avoiding the apartment entirely. Neighbors who had shown support went silent when asked to provide statements. Everyone wanted to help until help required official involvement. I would navigate this alone. The investigator arrived on a Tuesday morning. I sat in my living room, hands folded to conceal the tremors, and demonstrated my competence while enduring the worst mental health crisis of my life. Every question felt like a trap. Every answer was scrutinized. She noted the hostile living environment, but said it wasn't her department. The investigation concluded with bureaucratic efficiency. I was competent. No immediate danger. They recommended addressing household conflict and provided pamphlets about mediation. Lexi smirked at the findings. The system had failed exactly as she had expected. I made a decision that night. The recording of Lexi admitting she had done this before, the one Mrs. Chun had quietly captured, needed to be shared. Privacy concerns battled with survival instinct. I chose survival. The building WhatsApp group exploded when I posted the audio. Lexi's voice, clear and confident, admitting she had helped people like this before and expressing her frustration that they never want to change. The revelation that this was a pattern, not a misguided attempt to help one difficult roommate. Former neighbors of her previous victim confirmed the story. The pattern was identical, the escalation predictable, the destruction methodical. Lexi wasn't misguided. She was a serial abuser who targeted neurodivergent people through their support systems. I confronted her alone in the kitchen that night. No cameras, no witnesses, just truth. I told her she wasn't helping. She was torturing me. She knew this. Her mask dropped completely. The sweet concern vanished. She snarled that someone had to make me act normal. My parents had clearly failed. Society was too soft on people like me. She was doing what needed to be done. Mrs. Chun entered at that moment, phone in hand, ostensibly checking a recipe. But I saw the recording icon. She captured Lexi's true face, the cruelty beneath the facade of care, evidence that couldn't be edited or reframed. I faced a choice. Use the recording to destroy Lexi completely or leverage it for peace. Revenge was tempting, like water in the desert. But I was too tired for war. I chose a middle path. The ultimatum was simple. 30 days to leave voluntarily, or the recording would go everywhere that mattered. Her employer would see it. Her MLM upline would receive copies. Every social media platform where she portrayed herself as a wellness advocate would know the truth. Mercy with teeth. Lexi's hands shook for the first time since I had known her. The control she had wielded so confidently crumbled. She tried to negotiate, then threaten, then plead. Each attempt bounced off my exhausted determination. The power dynamic had finally, definitively shifted. Hugh returned from his work hideout to find us in a standoff. His exhaustion mirrored mine as he absorbed the scene. His response surprised no one. He couldn't do this anymore. The words came out flat, defeated. He was moving back with his parents. The apartment drama had broken him too. Lexi's final manipulation attempt was desperate. She turned to Hugh, insisting he would choose her over me. Her confidence wavered as he shook his head. He repeated that he was done with both of us, that we were both crazy, that he just wanted peace. Her last card had failed spectacularly. The next month passed in careful choreography. I spent it in Sarah's spare room while Lexi served out her notice under constant community surveillance. Every return to the apartment happened with witnesses present. Sarah, Mrs. Chun, Catherine, or other neighbors always materialized when needed. Lexi couldn't make a move without observation. She tried several times to provoke confrontations, hoping to flip the narrative again. Each attempt met silent recording phones and steady gazes. The building had closed ranks. Her isolation was complete and suffocating. She left after 3 weeks, claiming the environment had become hostile and unsafe. The irony was not lost on anyone. The building's culture shifted subtly, but significantly after her departure. No official policies changed, but an unspoken neurodivergent protection network emerged. Weighted blankets appeared in common areas. Quiet hours were religiously observed. New residents received gentle orientation about community values. The change wasn't dramatic, just a collective decision to be better. I reclaimed my apartment slowly, rebuilding my sensory environment with donated items and hard-won peace. Neighbors contributed what they could, a white noise machine here, a weighted blanket there. Mrs. Chin's lap pad took pride of place on my couch. Each item represented the community, choosing compassion over cruelty. Sleep returned gradually. The first full night's rest felt like a miracle after months of stress-induced insomnia. My Fitbit showed the slow climb back to normal patterns. 3 hours became 4, then 5, then finally regular 7-hour stretches. My body began to trust safety again. Work accommodations were approved with full support. The performance improvement plan dissolved as my productivity recovered. Sarah had quietly documented my improvement, creating a counter-narrative to Lexi's sabotage. My colleague's relief was palpable as I returned to my competent self. Hugh sent a single text 6 months later, brief, heavy with unspoken weight. He was sorry. I had been right. Lexi was doing it to his cousin now. The cycle had already restarted with a new victim. My stomach sank at the news, but I had learned my limits. I forwarded his message to the disability rights group and hoped his cousin was stronger than me. Tom and I maintained our weekly video calls, eventually joined by 2 others who had survived similar situations. We shared strategies for recognizing predators disguised as well-intentioned helpers. The patterns were depressingly consistent. Always helping, always concerned, always escalating. Our informal support network grew organically. 1 year later, I lived alone by choice in the same apartment. Professional stability had returned with proper accommodations. The quiet support network that had formed through trauma remained, less urgent now, but still present. Neighbors still smiled in hallways. Mrs. Chin still checked in with homemade food. Sarah still joined for lunch breaks. The victory wasn't dramatic. No legal justice, no public vindication, no sweeping changes, just survival and slow healing. I sat on my couch during a video call with Tom and the others, my weighted blanket draped over my shoulders, sharing recognition strategies with someone whose family member had started dating a helpful new partner. The real victory was simpler than revenge. It was still being here, still functioning, still whole, despite someone's determined efforts to break me. Sometimes the most realistic ending is just endurance, just outlasting those who would reshape us into their image of normal. My apartment was mine again. My routines restored. My support systems rebuilt, stronger for having been tested. Not a fairy tale ending, just a human one. And that was enough. Thanks for watching until the end. Please consider subscribing for more content.